On their way to Erebus, where surviving Asgards had been discovered, the human diplomats were building and shaping their arguments on how to convince Bragi and the new High Council. Of course, it was encouraging that both the humans from Earth and the Asgard were xenophile people, and therefore seeking to form bonds with other species. But more importantly, they would have to ally in a federation and join their fleets in the hope of prevailing over the Replicators. But it was not at all what the Asgards had planned for the future of the two civilizations. They did not want to be equals in this alliance, but they rather aimed at becoming vassals and a scholarium for the forces of Earth. They had somehow come upon the information of the colossal fleets stationed in the Madelon system, acting as guardians against the Replicators, and they wanted those fleets to protect the Asgard territory too. In exchange, they would share their research and help the humans to develop new technologies far quicker than if they would be on their own. The diplomats sent by Homeworld Command and the Earth Overseer had to comply with the Asgard vision, as there was no other way to see it for Bragi and the High Council, so they agreed to the terms. Still, it felt strange for them. At the time of General Hammond and SG-1, the Asgards had always been guides for the ones they called the Fifth Race. But now, it was the humans who dominated their relationship, and as a consequence, would act as a shield against their enemies. Back on Earth, if it was reported as a diplomatic victory to the human leader, it surely proved to be a major shift in galactic history. Concerning the Replicators' threat, Homeworld Command still had several science ships roaming hostile sectors in stealth mode in the hope of finding their main colony, even if it had been a vain endeavor so far. It all changed in 2255 when the ISS Sagan detected the simultaneous activation of hundreds of hyperdrives in an uncharted part of the Replicator territory. When the ISS Sagan arrived on site, it was there, the original Replicator colony, their home planet. And more importantly, it was almost defenseless, with only a small flotilla remaining in orbit. Once in possession of this information, it was a never-seen uproar in the tactical quarters of Homeworld Command. A summit meeting with the most influential generals was gathered as fast as possible. Even if it might be a trap, the opportunity to take the Replicator home planet and cripple their entire civilization could not be ignored, as it may never happen again. All the fleets stationed near the Madelon shipward were put on maximum alert, and just 3 days later, the admirals confidently gave the order to enter Replicator space. Their journey to their objective did not find any resistance, as the enemy starbases on the way were defenseless. Arden Miles, elected Earth Overseer in 2248, and who, before his political career, had had a military background, made the declaration of war official just minutes before the offensive to keep the element of surprise until the last moment. The Replicator flotilla supposed to defend the system was wiped out in minutes, and now the human fleets were free to start the bombing of the planet without any opposition. For 72 hours, the bombs relentlessly destroyed the infrastructures of the planet. It was only when the scans indicated a level of destruction higher than 50% that the next phase, the invasion phase, started. Troops landed on the planet, and thousands of soldiers penetrated the ruins of what used to be the main hubs of this world. The human soldiers faced disoriented and therefore useless in battle machines. Indeed, the bombings had been spectacularly efficient, and the Replicator hive mind was suffering from glitches and malfunctions. This represented an unexpected but good surprise for the human commanders, as they were confronted to far less resistance than anticipated. However, the greatest surprise was yet to come. After a few weeks of battles on the ground, the Replicators just stopped fighting back. They became still and docile. Moreover, the soldiers on site were astonished when they discovered that the machines obeyed their orders. It represented a complete and major victory for Homeworld Command, but as a consequence, they were faced with a new dilemma. Deprived from their main planet, the Replicators were extremely weakened but not extinct, and they could in time rebuild and become a threat again. So the choice was between stopping and establishing a new defense line, or continuing until the Replicators were no more. Tactically, so many parameters were involved that the generals hesitated, but Arden Miles intervened. The Earth Overseer wanted to carry on with the offensive, so in the long run, his population could live without the worry of war. It would mean substantial cuts in the other budgets, but in the long term, the military budget could be reduced again, and it would socially benefit the people of Earth. The order was given. The fleets built in the Madeline system to defend the human planets were now officially an invasion force. Their advance in the Replicator territory was implacable and inexorable. The star bases, the planets, and the star systems were conquered one after another. The shipwards of Madelon were constantly building and sending reinforcements, so the fleets were constantly growing in size and firepower. Of course, the Replicators tried to launch a few counterattacks, but it was too late, and cut from so many resources it seemed desperate, and had no impact at all on the relentless advance of the human fleets. Finally, after 3 years of battle, what used to be the Replicator territory was completely absorbed. They did not control any planet anymore. They could not replicate anymore. Their empire was extinct. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Liaran Narrative Gaming channel to discover the rest of the story. See ya.